everyone and welcome back to my Warhammer 40k guides. I am Brady and today I will be talking about the meta and what the meta is. You guys have probably heard me mention the meta multiple times in a bunch of videos, and I felt the need to clear some things up, especially for you newer players that some of you might not understand. So first off, what is the meta? Well, the meta is what armies or units happen to be the strongest while also being the most popular. Sometimes the two are connected, and the army or units that are popular because they are strong, and other times it's just because people like the army, which makes it popular. More often than not though, when talking about tournaments, the most popular armies usually happen to be the stronger armies, so it's pretty easy to determine the meta by which armies seem to be doing the best at the time. There are a couple of different types of meta that I will go over in this video. There is your local meta and your global meta. Although they normally share the same armies and units, most of the time they are very different from each other. And when building your competitive army list, you should always consider what meta you will be playing in, and then build your list to be best suited against that meta. To discuss this further, let's start with the most important one, the global meta. The global meta consists of armies you see at the top tables of every major ITC event in the world. For a long time, the global meta was Chaos Soup, Imperium Soup, and Inari, which is basically Eldar Soup. Those were by far the strongest and most popular armies at the time, pre-chapter approved. So if you were going to any major event, chances are you would face off against at least one or two of these armies during your tournament games. So to prepare for that meta, you would add in some counters to your army for stuff like Magnus and Mortarion, since you were almost guaranteed to play at least one game against those models, since they were extremely popular in Chaos Soup lists at the time. If you didn't have any good counters or good ways of dealing with those models, then your army list probably didn't have that good of a chance of going far in the tournament. There is definitely much more to this, but I'm just giving a generalized example. So the global meta is what you find on the top tables of major ITC events, and is usually dictated by whatever armies have the strongest rules and units at that specific time. Local meta is the meta that you have at your local gaming store, and can be vastly different from the global meta for a few reasons. First reason is that Warhammer 40k is expensive, and most people don't have the disposable income to drop hundreds of dollars on the most popular armies or units, so most people make do with what they have. So to give an example, my local meta is a lot of Ultramarine gunlines and Tyranid hordes. There is only one dedicated Inari player, and I'm the only dedicated Chaos player out of around 40 people. So if you came to one of my local events and prepared your list to counter the global meta instead of the local meta, you might have a harder time because you built your list to counter armies you will most likely not be playing against. And vice versa, for if you built a list that's good against your local meta but brought it to a major ITC tournament, you're probably going to have some trouble in the later rounds if you're not prepared for the global meta armies. So for this instance, my competitive list changes greatly when I travel to other events because I build for the global meta at that point. But when I play in my locals, I make sure to counter the armies that I know I'm going to be facing in the later rounds of the tournament, which in my group happens to be this one Tyranid player who's extremely good, and a couple of Imperium players who also seem to be extremely good. So when I go to play in my local meta, I make sure to counter those armies over anything else. Another reason that the local meta is different from the global meta is because your local meta consists of a lot of players that have picked an army that they truly love, and they like to stick to that army and play it as best as they can. A lot of people in the global meta that travel to events, they spend the extra money on buying multiple armies so they can pick and choose which one happens to be the strongest at the time. But in your local meta at your local gaming store, most people will usually have one or two armies, and only one of those armies will normally have the units needed to even be competitive. So more often than not, you will see the people that go to your local events playing the same army over and over and over again because that's just all they have. And that does tie into the first reason, because Warhammer 40k is expensive, but it's also because some people just love their armies and they want to make the army that they love work in a competitive way, so they try their best to do so. Global meta does, however, influence your local meta by a lot. I've noticed in my local meta, more people are starting to slowly build new armies or add new additions to their list, which brings me to my other point. The meta, whether it's your local meta or global meta, never stays the same for long. With the way Games Workshop is constantly balancing the game through nerfs and buffs to units and armies, we keep seeing rapid changes in the meta. The first month of 8th edition was pretty much nothing but Storm Ravens and Bobby G everywhere. Then it turned into nothing but Chaos Soup spamming Malefic Lords. Then Chaos Soup with no Malefic Lords. Then it was Gunline and Nari armies that abused the way Soul Burst used to work pre-chapter approved. And now the meta seems to be in a spot where Inari or Craftworld Inari seems to be the best, with Blood Angels following really close. Imperium Soup is still there, it's just not doing as well, and Chaos seems to have dropped off the face of the earth. All of these changes were in the past 6 months, and in my opinion, that's extremely fast for the meta to change, and I don't see it slowing down anytime soon with how Games Workshop is constantly balancing the game and still releasing new codexes that are inevitably going to shake things up. This is why I'm reluctant in telling people which armies are good when they're asking which army they should start buying, and instead I usually tell them pick the army that you like the most. Don't always go with the army that's the strongest, because with the way Games Workshop is going, the strongest army might not be the strongest army for a very long time. If you're getting into the game with hopes that you'll have to buy one army and you'll be stuck playing the best army for the rest of the game, that's no longer the case. This is not 7th edition anymore. The rules change constantly, so whatever was the strongest army last month, there's no guarantee it's going to be the strongest army the next month. So my advice to you is, again, if you're brand new and you're trying to pick an army based off of the meta and what's going to be strong, I recommend just picking whatever army you enjoy the most. That has to be whether you enjoy how the army looks, how the army plays, the lore of the army, all that kind of stuff goes into when you're picking an army. So again, I wouldn't recommend picking an army because it's strong, I would recommend picking an army because you like it. So to summarize this guide, make sure you know what meta you are playing in when building your list. If you're going to a local tournament, make sure to try and counter the armies you know will be the most popular, so when you do inevitably face them in the later rounds, you're going to have a better chance. Same goes with the global meta. Plan on going to a large event, make sure you built your list to be able to defeat the armies you know you will inevitably face in the later rounds. And in order to discover what the meta is at that current point in time, you need to do some research. For your local meta, the research is just learn who are the better players in your club are and what the armies and units they use are. And for the global meta, you want to keep up to date with which armies are getting into the top 8 for each major event. And you can do this by watching my most recent top 10 armies videos or subscribing to the Best Coast Pairings app to get to see the top 8 armies and their list for each ITC event for up to 3 days after the event has taken place. Well anyways, that's going to cover everything I can think of for this video. If you guys thought of anything I forgot to mention, please leave a comment down below. And if you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you are a subscriber but would like to help the channel even further, you can do so on Patreon. A pledge of $4 gets you access to the Almost Pro Gaming Discord channel, where you can talk with me or other players looking to get better at competitive Warhammer 40k. We discuss 40k news, leaks, and even help each other with tactics and list building. Well anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video, I hope this video was able to help you out, and I'll see you in the next one. Happy wargaming!